Welcome to the Book Review Podcast.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving deep into a book that really stirred things up in the self-help world. It's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, a counterintuitive approach to living a good life by Mark Manson.
Yeah, it definitely takes a different angle, doesn't it?
It really does. Forget all that relentless positivity stuff. Manson argues that actually embracing negativity, accepting the tough parts of life, and being really selective about what you care about, that's the key.
It's about choosing your fucks wisely, as he puts it rather bluntly.
Exactly. So we'll be exploring themes like why trying too hard to be happy can backfire, the importance of failure, and figuring out your core values.
And how our struggles kind of define us, how entitlement can be a trap. It's quite a counterintuitive ride.
Okay, let's jump in. Chapter 1, Don't Try. Manson starts with Charles Bukowski.
Ah, Bukowski.
Yeah.
Not your typical inspiration figure.
Definitely not. Hard-drinking writer, lots of rejection, pretty rough life overall. But Manson uses him to make a point, right?
Exactly. Bukowski eventually found success. But it wasn't despite his flaws and failures. It was almost because he accepted them. He wasn't trying to be something he wasn't.
It just sort of owned his reality.
Kind of, yeah. And Manson contrasts this with our culture's obsession with positive thinking. Always needing to be better, happier, more successful.
Which can totally backfire. That leads to what he calls the feedback loop from hell.
Right. You feel anxious, then you feel anxious about feeling anxious, or angry about being angry.
Yeah. Just spirals. You end up feeling bad about feeling bad.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And it connects to this idea, maybe from Alan Watts, the backwards law.
Oh, explain that.
It's the idea that the more you consciously pursue a positive feeling, like happiness, the more you actually highlight its absence. Desiring a positive experience is itself kind of a negative experience.
Oh, that's interesting. So chasing happiness makes you less happy.
In a way, yes. But Watts, and Manson echoes this, suggests that accepting the negative, accepting pain, accepting struggle is paradoxically a positive experience.
Okay, so that's the subtle art bit. It's not about being totally indifferent, like I don't care about anything.
No, not at all. It's much more nuanced. It's about being comfortable with being different, with things not always being perfect, and really, really choosing what gets your energy.
He has those 3 subtleties, doesn't he?
He does. First, you simply can't give a fuck about everything. There's too much noise you have to filter.
Makes sense. What's the second?
Second, you must give a fuck about something. The key is choosing things that are actually important and meaningful to you. Your values, relationships, genuine goals.
Okay, filter the noise, focus on what matters. And the third?
The third subtlety is that, like it or not, you're always choosing what to give a fuck about. Every minute, every reaction, you're making a choice. It might be unconscious, but it's happening.
So it's about making that choice conscious and deliberate.
Exactly. And Manson's upfront that this book isn't going to make your problems vanish.
Right, it's not a magic wand.
No, it's more like a tool, a different way to approach solving problems, understanding suffering, maybe with a bit more compassion and humility.
Okay, that's a great setup. Let's move to chapter 2. Happiness is a problem. Intriguing title.
Yeah, it definitely grabs you. He starts with a story, like a fable about a prince.
The one shielded from all suffering.
That's the one. Lived in total comfort, never saw sickness, old age, death, anything negative. And guess what?
He was miserable.
Utterly miserable. It illustrates the point that suffering, difficulty, it's just part of the deal. You can't avoid it, and maybe you shouldn't even try to entirely.
It flies in the face of so much self-help advice, Be happy. Avoid pain.
Totally. He even has this funny sort of bleak character, Disappointment Panda.
Yeah, what's the panda's deal?
Disappointment Panda tells the harsh truths, like the idea that our brains are kind of wired for dissatisfaction. It's an evolutionary thing, apparently. Keeps us striving, innovating, surviving. A little bit of discontent is actually useful.
So happiness isn't a destination we reach.
No, it's more like it comes from solving problems. Yeah. And the thing is, problems never stop.
They just change.
They just change. Or they get upgraded. You solve your money problems. Now you have how to invest wisely problems or whatever. Happiness is in the solving, the engagement, not the absence of problems.
That feels more realistic, actually. Less pressure. What about emotions are overrated? That sounds a bit cold.
It does. But his point isn't that emotions aren't important. They are. They're feedback signals. Like pain tells you not to touch a hot stove.
Okay, so they give us information.
Exactly. But they are commandments. Just because you feel angry doesn't mean lashing out is the right response. You feel fear doesn't mean you're actually in mortal danger. You still have a choice in how you respond.
So acknowledge the feeling, get the data, but then choose the action.
Precisely. Which leads directly to the idea of choose your struggle.
Right, because everyone has struggles.
Everyone. Life throws curveballs. So the question isn't, how do I avoid all problems? It's, what problems am I willing to deal with? What kind of struggle, what kind of pain is worthwhile for me?
Finding the problems you actually want to solve.
Yeah, or at least problems you find meaningful enough to endure the discomfort they bring. That's where a different kind of happiness lies, according to Manson.
Okay, let's tackle chapter 3. You are not special. This one can feel a bit harsh.
It can ruffle some feathers, for sure. He uses this anecdote about a guy named Jimmy, who just had to be the best, the most exceptional at everything.
And it made him kind of delusional.
Yeah, and ultimately unhappy. Manson's critiquing this modern trend, where everyone gets a trophy, everyone's told they're amazing just for showing up.
The sort of inflated self-esteem culture.
Exactly. He argues it breeds entitlement. People start expecting great things without necessarily putting in the work or facing reality.
And reality includes things fall apart.
That's the phrase he uses. It's a reminder that, things go wrong.
Yeah.
Failure happens. Adversity is normal. Expecting life to be a smooth upward curve is setting yourself up for a fall.
And facing that failure is actually how we grow.
It is. Which is why this idea of the tyranny of exceptionalism is so relevant now.
With social media and everything.
Absolutely. You're constantly bombarded with everyone else's highlight reel, these curated images of amazing success and happiness. It makes average feel like failure.
Yeah, you feel like you're falling behind if you're not doing something extraordinary every day.
Right. It creates this immense pressure and sense of inadequacy.
So Manson asks that question, but if I'm not special, what's the point?
Yeah, and his answer is actually really liberating, I think. He suggests finding the extraordinary in the ordinary.
Appreciating the simple stuff.
Appreciating the everyday moments, the relationships, the small wins, without needing them to be validated as special or exceptional by external standards. There's profound value right there.
That's a good reminder. Okay, chapter 4, the value of suffering. We're seeing a theme here.
Definitely building on the previous ideas. He starts with a really striking story. Hiru Onoda.
The Japanese soldier who kept fighting WWII for, decades after it ended.
Yeah, incredible story. Hiding in the jungle in the Philippines, utterly committed to his mission based on old orders and misinformation.
Wow. What's the point Manson draws from that?
It shows the immense power of commitment to a chosen value or struggle. Even if the value itself is flawed or based on bad information, the commitment itself shapes reality. It also shows how deeply we need meaning.
We need something to give a fuck about, even if it leads us down a strange path.
Pretty much. And then he introduces the self-awareness onion.
Okay, peeling back the layers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Layer 1 is just identifying your emotions. I
Yeah.
feel sad. Layer 2 is understanding why you feel that way. I feel sad because I failed the test.
And the core.
Layer 3, the core, is understanding the personal values underlying those feelings and reasons. I feel sad because I failed, and I value competence and achievement. Getting to that core value is key.
Because that tells you what you really care about.
Right. And understanding your values helps you differentiate between, say, rock star problems and genuine issues.
What are rock star problems? Like complaining about the private jet being late?
Sort of, yeah. Is his term for the idea that even people who seem to have it all still have problems. He uses examples like a struggling guitarist versus, say, Pete Best getting kicked out of the Beatles right before they got huge.
Ouch. Yeah, different scales of problems, but still problems. Suffering is universal.
Exactly. And understanding your values helps you identify what he calls shitty values.
Okay, what makes a value shitty, according to Manson?
Things like pleasure-seeking it constantly is superficial and uncontrollable. Material success often relies on external factors, comparison. Always being right stops you from learning. And constant positivity, which we know leads to that feedback loop.
So they're often shallow, outside our control, or socially destructive?
Generally, yes. Or just not conducive to long-term well-being.
So what are the good values then?
Good values are the opposite. They're reality-based, socially constructive, and importantly, immediate and controllable.
Like what? Give me examples.
Honesty, innovation, vulnerability, self-respect, curiosity, standing up for oneself, things you can enact right now through your own choices and actions.
And he mentions contemplating mortality as a good value.
Yeah, it sounds morbid, but he argues that facing the reality of our own death provides crucial perspective. It clarifies what's really important, puts the smaller stuff in its place.
Definitely gives you focus. Okay, chapter 5. You are always choosing. This feels central.
It really is. It ties everything together. He uses the analogy of running a marathon. You choose to endure the pain because the goal matters to you.
So even when things feel like they're just happening to us,
There's still an element of choice. Maybe not in the event itself, but always in how we interpret it, how we respond to it. That's the choice.
which leads to the responsibility fault fallacy. This is a big one.
Huge. It's the idea that you might not be at fault for something bad happening, like, say, getting hit by a drunk driver, but you are still responsible for your response.
Responsible for how you deal with the aftermath, the recovery, the emotion.
Exactly. Taking responsibility isn't about blame. It's about empowerment. It means you recognize you have agency in how you move forward. Blame keeps you stuck. Responsibility lets you act.
That's a powerful distinction. He uses Malala Yousafzai as an example of responding to tragedy, right?
Yes, an incredible example. Faced with unimaginable violence and adversity, she chose a response of courage, advocacy, and resilience, rather than victimhood or silence. It highlights that capacity for choice even in the darkest times.
And he acknowledges genetics, the hand we're dealt.
He does. You don't choose your genes or your upbringing or many circumstances, but you always choose your response. That's where your power lies. Always.
Which is the antidote to what he calls victimhood chic.
Right. Getting stuck in blaming others or circumstances. And also the idea that there is no how.
Meaning, no easy paint-by-numbers solution.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to figure it out yourself. Taking responsibility means embracing that uncertainty and finding your own way, not waiting for someone to hand you a perfect manual.
Makes sense. Okay, chapter 6. You're wrong about everything, but so am I.
I like the humility here.
Me too. The core idea is that certainty is the enemy of growth. Being too sure you're right closes you off.
We're architects of our own beliefs, he says.
Yeah, meaning our brains create meaning, interpretations. These become our beliefs, but they're often biased, flawed, incomplete. We seek confirmation, avoid contradiction.
So we need to be careful what you believe.
Definitely. Strongly held beliefs can blind us. He mentions the recovered memory controversies, showing how convincing but unreliable beliefs can be. Certainty feels good, but it can be dangerous.
The dangers of pure certainty. It stops learning.
Absolutely. If you know you're right, why listen? Why explore? Why change?
No.
It leads to stagnation. And this relates to Manson's law of avoidance.
Yes, which is the more something threatens your identity, the more you'll avoid it.
We don't like confronting things that challenge who we think we are.
Exactly. It's uncomfortable, maybe even scary, which is why he talks about needing to metaphorically kill yourself.
Whoa, okay. Explain that one carefully.
Haha, yes. He means ego death, letting go of old, rigid identities, realizing your current self isn't the final version. Growth requires shedding those old skins, embracing uncertainty about who you are and what you believe.
It's about being willing to be wrong, to change your mind.
Right. And he suggests ways to be a little less certain. Basically, ask yourself, what if I'm wrong about this? How might I be wrong? What would it mean if I were wrong? Be open to the answers.
Cultivating doubt as a virtue. Okay, chapter 7. Failure is the way forward. Again, counterintuitive.
Very. He uses his own failures, business ventures, relationships, whatever, to show that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the path to success.
The failure-success paradox.
That's it. You can't get good at something without failing along the way. Lots of tiny failures lead to improvement. But our fear of failing often stops us from even starting.
So we avoid the very thing we need to do to succeed.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that pain is part of the process. He brings up Dabrowski's work with Holocaust survivors.
Showing how extreme suffering can sometimes lead to profound psychological growth and resilience.
Right. Not to glorify suffering, but to show that enduring hardship, processing pain, it builds strength. It's not something to be avoided at all costs.
And then there's the do something principle.
Yeah, I love this one. Action isn't just the effect of motivation, it can also be the cause of it.
So don't wait to feel inspired, just start doing the thing.
Just start. Do anything, even a tiny step. The action itself can generate momentum and motivation. Don't feel like working out. Just put on your shoes. Action first.
That's really practical advice. Okay, chapter 8. The importance of saying no. This links back to choosing your fucks.
Directly. Manson talks about his own struggles with overcommitment, trying to please everyone, and realizing that saying yes to everything meant he wasn't truly committed to anything. Real freedom came from choosing where to commit and saying no to the rest.
Saying no frees up energy for what actually matters.
Precisely. And he argues that rejection makes your life better.
How so? Getting rejected doesn't feel great.
No, but experiencing rejection and learning to give rejection by saying no helps clarify your values. It forces you to define what you stand for, what lines you won't cross. It sharpens your focus.
This sounds related to setting boundaries.
Absolutely critical, especially in relationships, knowing where you end and the other person begins. Taking responsibility for your own stuff, not theirs, and vice versa. Saying no is a key part of maintaining healthy boundaries.
And healthy boundaries build trust.
Yes, because trust comes from honesty and consistency over time. Being clear about your boundaries, saying no when necessary, even if it's difficult, demonstrates integrity. People know where they stand.
Which leads to the final idea in the chapter, freedom through commitment. Seems like a contradiction.
It does, but think about it. If you commit to nothing, you drift. But if you choose a few deep commitments, a relationship, a career path, a core value, and say no to things that distract from them, you gain depth, focus, and a stronger sense of purpose. That's a kind of freedom. Breadth is easy. Depth provides meaning.
Committing deeply gives you direction and anchors you.
Exactly. Instead of being pulled in a million directions.
Okay, final chapter, chapter 9, and then you die. Very direct.
Doesn't pull any punches, does he? He starts with a story about witnessing a friend's accidental death.
And how that brought mortality front and center.
Yeah, that sudden, stark confrontation with death shifted his perspective dramatically, made him realize the importance of living in line with his values now.
It connects to that idea of something beyond ourselves, drawing on Ernest Becker.
Right. Becker talked about death terror, our underlying anxiety about dying, and how we create immortality projects to cope.
Things we invest in that feel like they'll last beyond us.
Like our work, our kids, our legacy, our beliefs. Things that give life meaning in the face of its finitude. Acknowledging death fuels our search for meaning.
So facing death isn't just depressing, it can be motivating, which maybe leads to the sunny side of death.
Exactly. It's not about being morbid. It's about realizing that death gives life its meaning. Because our time is limited, our choices matter. Appreciating the present, focusing on our chosen values, living authentically, death awareness can actually enhance life, make it richer, more vibrant.
Wow, okay. That really brings it all together. What a deep dive into the subtle art of not giving a fuck.
It really covers a lot of ground, challenging conventional wisdom at pretty much every turn.
Hopefully everyone listening got some food for thought on maybe reevaluating where they're putting their energy, their fucks.
We touched on embracing discomfort, choosing struggles wisely, finding happiness in solving problems, the limits of positivity, the need for good values.
Understanding failure, setting boundaries, and ultimately using the awareness of our own mortality to live more intentionally.
Yeah, it's a lot to chew on. What really stood out to you from our discussion? Maybe what fucks are worth reconsidering?
For me, it's probably that responsibility-fault distinction. Taking responsibility even when it's not my fault, that feels really empowering.
It's a game changer. The book definitely offers a unique toolkit for navigating life.
It really does. We definitely encourage listeners to check it out if these ideas resonated.
Absolutely. It's a refreshing, if sometimes jarring, perspective.
Thanks for listening to the Book Review Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a comment. See you next time.